There's a lot of talk about craft and design skills like UI design, research, facilitation, prototyping, and mastering AI vibe coding tools. But what if the one skill that makes all those skills even stronger is the one that most designers tend to overlook? I'm talking about writing. Stick around because today we're talking with Thijs Kraan about why writing is the ultimate skill and how it can change your career in ways that you don't expect. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. Ever ship a feature that should have never seen the light of day or survived a sprint planning where nothing got planned? Or maybe you just said, let's circle back under your breath for the 50th time this week. You, my friend, have earned a merit-ish badge. Introducing the Beyond UX Design Merit Badges, a vintage-inspired sticker series for UX designers, PMs, and engineers who have seen things. Choose from 3 sets: soft skills, sharp tongue, the cult of Figma initiation, pixel pusher survival kit, and more to come soon, so stay tuned. Each set of 5 badges celebrates the chaos, the coping, and the conference calls that should have been DMs. Stick them on your laptop and flaunt them at your stand-up. Show the world you made it out of Q2 with your sanity mostly intact. Get 1 set of 5 stickers for $12 or 2 sets for $20 at beyonduxdesign.com/badges. Just promise me one thing: send pics and show me where you stick them. How often do you stare at a blank Figma canvas, unsure where to start? This episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives you instant access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI and user flows from apps you love, and content is added weekly so you never have to start from scratch again. Quickly find exactly what you need, search by app category, UI patterns, or even specific features. My team and I use Mobbin daily at work to find useful patterns, and it helps my team work much more efficiently. And honestly, I can't imagine kicking off a new feature without Mobbin. You ready to level up your design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. All right, so we talk a lot about design skills in the zeitgeist on LinkedIn, social media. I talk a lot about the soft skills and stuff in the show, but not everybody does. They talk about research, they talk about facilitation, they talk about prototyping, and most recently all the AI tools. But that one set that my guest today, Thijs Kraan, thinks is the most important of all is writing. And it might be one that you are overlooking. So I am so excited to have Thijs on the show today. Thijs Kraan is a growth partner for designers turned founders. He builds founder-led growth engines so they attract clients, win projects faster, and position themselves as category leaders. And you didn't put this in your bio, Thijs, but I would be willing to bet you might say you did a lot of this through the act of writing. And I am so excited to have you on the show today to talk all about that. So I know I've read your bio a little bit. I think everybody, if you've been following Thijs on LinkedIn, you know all about this. He talks about writing all the time. But for those who aren't familiar, tell everybody a little bit about you and how did you go from design to this idea that writing is one of the most important skill sets that we're probably overlooking. Thijs, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you on. How's it going, man?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, dude. There's a lot of people listening right now that probably follow you on LinkedIn. You're pretty popular, dude. You got a lot of followers. You talk a lot about writing all the time, but you went from design to writing and consulting, but using writing as a tool to get you to that next phase of your career. So I know I read that little bio. Tell us a little bit about you and ultimately how'd you go from design to realizing that writing was the key?
When we're actually going back, I actually started as a web developer. So I studied web development first. I started building websites for clients. Then after doing websites, I noticed like to make a website, you need to build a brand or design a brand because you need the colors, you need the fonts, you need everything to make the website look good and function well. That's actually also how I got into writing or copywriting in the first place. Like you will need the copy on the website. So I basically sold the entire package. I did the branding, I did the website, and I did all the content basically. And it was just the package I sold to clients. And then eventually I learned from that I really like doing the design part more. So I got into design, started studying interaction design. I did a bachelor's in design. And during that time, I started going through internships in corporate space and a startup space. I really like designing, but I started to notice that I liked the writing part more because I started writing near the end of my interaction design bachelor's. And that's when I really started writing every day, started noticing the benefits of writing every day. And then I started writing about writing as well. And I started writing for other designers or founders. Over time, I just started doing more and more writing because I really liked the writing part. I liked reading, and writing was a way for me to actually learn from what I was reading and apply from what I was reading by first reading, consuming, and turning that into a plan or something I could start taking action on and then go back. I started looking back, basically consuming what I was doing to reflect on it. Then I synthesized on it and I wrote about it again and again. So that's what I really fell in love with writing, because I noticed writing was sort of the skill that accelerated all my other skills because it helped me reflect on whatever I was doing or consuming to take the most important part out of it and start applying it as fast as possible.
I love that. So the idea was you started writing, you wrote because you had to, but I think what you realized, if I'm like paraphrasing here, but you realized that writing enabled you to go back and then think about the thing that you were writing about and then internalize that and then come back with like maybe a better version of it, or it helped you to think about it, or it helped to improve that thing that you were writing about. Is that kind of what you're thinking? I feel like it's such an impactful insight. I love that.
Yeah, I eventually came down to that part where I started realizing that. And I eventually started doing a 30-day writing challenge, just writing every day for 30 minutes, publishing one post. That's actually how I started writing in public. And I just kept that streak going forever. I never broke the streak. The streak is still going on. I still publish one post every day. I do not write every day. Most of the days I do. But at the beginning, I wrote every day. And I found that by writing every day, I started learning a lot of things. And that's what I think designers can also apply within their work, because a lot of the thinking that goes into a design is usually the most important part. I often assume like you want to solve a problem, you want to understand the problem, you want to think about the problem. And if you don't have a clear idea of what the problem you're solving is, you can solve the problem, or you make a solution that doesn't solve a problem. And I think that's a trap people can often fall into, especially people who are very focused on the visual end. I think that is very important, but not for everything. I think most of the product designers and the work they do very much comes down to how they think about the problem they're solving and how they wrote down that initial problem, thinking about what is the actual best solution here and how can we design that solution. And that's why I think writing is very important.
Yeah, I love that. So what kind of stuff when you started writing, what kind of stuff did you start writing? Was it just LinkedIn posts? Was it just like a journal, or did you start writing something specific? Was it like product documentation, or like what did you start writing with when you did this 30-day challenge? How did you start? Was it just like writing thoughts out, or how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I was trying to get more clients in the first place. That's not the reason I started writing. I learned, don't know from who, probably from consuming a lot of resources, that writing was a powerful thing to do, even was it journaling or something else. I never actually built the habit of journaling because I didn't always have a good reason why. And then when I started publishing content or putting myself out in the world, I would assume that would eventually help me grow a network. That's how I saw other people grew a network as well. So I just set the deadline of writing one post every day, and I started writing about what I was learning, what I was seeing in the industry, what I was doing for myself, to basically also synthesize whatever I was doing and learn to apply for myself. So figuring out, okay, what are the steps I want to walk through, and what should I be writing about, or should I be doing and learning, and then writing about that to deepen that knowledge.
I love that, man. So you said something a second ago that it really kind of struck me, and I want to dig into this a little bit. But what you mentioned was like writing helped you think about it. And so you get your thoughts out, it helps you compose your thoughts. And there's this idea that writing is tied directly to thinking. And especially when it comes to UX design, product design, starting with just visuals, throwing some stuff out there, no thought put into it, none of it really makes sense. Writing is the catalyst that helps you to start thinking about that. I wonder if could you expand on that a little bit more? Maybe how did that come to you? Is that something where you just started writing, you're like, oh, it clicked, and you're like, oh, damn, I get it now? Or did you try to just skip the writing part, or did you always just go to writing first? Like, how did you come to that realization that writing is the catalyst for thinking?
I think I read it somewhere as well, but I also noticed that within my writing itself, because when I start writing, I start putting things on paper. And when I think I have a clear idea in my mind, when I eventually sit down to write it down, it isn't that clear anymore. Or I wrote something down and it isn't clear first to myself. And if it's not clear for myself, then it can be clear to someone else. And next to that, when I was writing my ideas down, I noticed gaps within whatever I was thinking. So let's say you're writing about a piece of work that you were doing. You want to write down the entire process. But when you write down that process after you've done it, you notice there have been a lot of missing elements.
I love that you call that out, because I had an interview not long ago with Marcello Calbucci, who wrote a book about PR FAQs. Are you familiar with PR? Have you heard of those before? A PR FAQ. PR is press release, FAQ, frequently asked questions. Anyway, it's one of those documents that Amazon uses, right? And you've probably heard this, but before a meeting starts, you have to write a document. Everyone has to read the document. And the whole point of that is to get everybody on the same page. But there's value in that initial step of writing that PR FAQ. It's the press release, it's advertising what this feature is going to be, and then it's thinking through a bunch of questions that your team is going to ask, internal versus external questions, customer questions, or questions for the internal team, and you go through that and you think about it. And immediately the first thing I thought of was this example of writing this, and that interview that I did with Marcello. And I started doing this. It's funny because like prior to this, like, I always think, oh yeah, writing stuff, it makes sense. I hadn't ever actually tried that myself at work. And so after I had that interview with Marcello, I actually started to do PR FAQs for different features, especially bigger features, ones that were maybe more complex or bigger, more complicated, a lot of moving parts and things like that. And what I realized was sharing that document, like you said, it helps you point out the holes. But the other advantage is like your team gets to point out the holes. And so the other people, your product manager, UX manager, whoever you work with, before you share it more broadly with the team, like, hey, tear this apart. What am I missing? What doesn't make sense? Because that's the other thing I think with this is like when you start to do something, you get like tunnel vision. You're like, this is the right way to do it. You fall in love with that thing. Writing it, sharing it, another outside perspective that is not in your head, who might think in a different mental model or something than you, they're able to pick it apart. With that, take their time. It's a lot easier to follow that thing that's been written as opposed to having a meeting about it. They can analyze it, they can internalize it, they can think about it, and then respond when they're ready. And that's what I love about the writing piece. And a question I have for you, I know you've been doing like entrepreneur, solopreneur on your own a lot, but what's your experience there with like writing, sharing, getting feedback and things like that? Like how has that helped you to maybe think about influence and changing people's minds or influencing decisions and things like that, which as designers, we always talk about how important that is. I'm curious how writing has helped you there.
Yes, I think if I come back to what you recently said, it's like doing this memo before you're doing something. It's just, it allows you the time to think about whatever is being discussed in a meeting. And when you're talking about stuff, it's very hard to go back and iterate on whatever you said. But when you write something down, you first get your thoughts on paper, you think about it a few more times, you iterate on it, you change things, you perfect it basically, so it's a smaller, direct message. The message is more concise. It's like the thing where I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write a short one. I think this is a quote from Mark Twain. It's just when you write something down and you try to be very clear, you can be way more concise instead of telling an entire story around it, which not makes sense in the moment. But when you write it down, you will see that and you'll be able to iterate on that specific idea. It's the same with designing, basically. When you're designing an interface, you have this idea inside of your head, but you're trying to communicate it with someone else or even yourself. Maybe you just need to get that idea or picture out of your head. You have to put it in Figma. You have to make things or optimize things and round the corners and make it pretty so it reflects the idea that you initially had in your head, and you can share that with stakeholders. I think writing is the same part. It's just an earlier stage. You still have that idea in your mind. You have this problem. You're trying to describe it in very clear words so you can communicate it clearly with others. And it's way easier to first write it down and then start talking about it instead of the other way around, because then you have already iterated on the idea that will make the sharing of that idea way more effective.
Yeah, I love that, dude. And the interesting thing that I think about, talk to other people about this topic, and it's come up quite a bit, but when people, especially designers with the proliferation of social media and people wanting to go on design Twitter or design LinkedIn, if that's even a thing, I don't even know if that's officially a thing. But when people think about writing, the first thing that comes to their mind, I think often is social media. And it's less about the things we write every day, emails, direct messages, things like that. There's so many things where UX designers need to write and need to influence every day. That's not necessarily social media. And I'm curious what you have to say to people who the first thing they think about is writing to become a content creator, writing to become famous on design Twitter. But essays, blogs, things like that is certainly one aspect that a designer can write about ideas. But there's thousands of other ways that designers should be thinking about writing to be more clear and influence. I'm curious what you say to people who might not make that connection immediately and think the design should speak for itself.
In general, I think writing is just a skill that you build. It's a meta skill that improves all your other skills. So in the first place, it makes a lot of sense to just write every day, even though it's not with a meaning behind it. You're not trying to get anything external out of it. You're not trying to get money from it. You're not trying to build network with it. You're not trying to influence people with it. It's just purely to develop your own ideas, to deepen your knowledge by writing about things, writing about whatever you're learning, to synthesize things. I think that is one of the big benefits writing in and of itself already has. When you distribute it with the world, the writing changes a little, because when you're writing for yourself, it's more a mechanism to synthesize whatever you're consuming or thinking about and trying to put it down on paper, to iterate on the ideas you have in your head and maybe share it with people. Whereas if you publish something on social media, you have to think about, I'm writing this for someone. It has to be some valuable to someone else. And based on that, I can show that it's good or valuable or worthwhile for me to do. When you're doing it for yourself, it's way more a personal development habit, just training your brain, basically. Just like when you're going to the gym, you're working out to improve your body. It takes a very long time to see improvements, or even a short time if you go very all in. And I think the same is with writing. If you're trying to clarify your ideas for yourself, I think that's where writing can already be very powerful.
Yeah, I love that. So let me ask you this then, because I think this is a really important thing. Like, you just brought up something that I think is really powerful here. And the idea is not to write to influence all the time, although that is one thing. It's not to write to publish posts, although that is one thing. But at the heart of it, writing to improve those other skills. It's the meta skill that improves all the other skills. And for anybody listening out there that might be thinking like, I'm not a good writer or whatever, what are some resources that you found, or things that you mentioned, the challenge? Let's talk about that a little bit. Those challenges, how do you go about doing them? Do you have a thought process there? Did you just make it up, 30-day writing challenge? Or how did you go about finding places where you could build that muscle or work it out, like you mentioned?
I don't know where I found the 30-day challenge myself, but someone on social media posted it, that they were either part of doing a challenge that they were sharing. Like, I did 30 days of 30 minutes of writing for every day and publish one post. So I just started doing that, and that eventually led into the long-term habit of writing almost every day and publishing one post every day. But for people to start themselves, just like how you start any habit, just try to start it small. Maybe it's 5 minutes of writing before you start working. It's just, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. This is the things I want to get done. And this is what's the most important thing of the day. Maybe the most important question. That's a way to already implement writing in your routine. Just do it before something else you're doing. When you're starting your day, get your coffee, you start writing for 5 minutes. Or maybe it's an evening, a wind down routine. When you finish work, you just start writing afterwards. Okay, I'm just going to sit down, reflect on the day, maybe see a part of your work to really get clarity on what you actually did that day, and reflect on that day to improve for yourself. That's also a way you could use writing. Or you could just do it every week. Maybe you just sit every Friday or every Saturday, and you just look back on your week and you just reflect on everything, all the events, all the calendar things you had, and you start writing about that. These are the things I learned. These are my key takeaways. And this is what I'm going to do next week. There are like 100 ways of how you might implement a writing habit. The easiest is often when you try to do it next to something you're already doing, or trying to make it useful to whatever you're already doing. So maybe it's communicating in Slack. You just try to spend a little bit more effort to better communicate or articulate your ideas. There are 100 ways. I think the most important part is just starting to do it and having some sort of a deadline. Like I had like a post every day that just forces you to put something out there. And it also pushes you to not overthink everything and just get something out there, get feedback on that, and then improve it again. And coming back to my previous idea, I think when you publish your writing into the world, I think the main reason for that should be to serve as a feedback loop. You're putting an idea into the world. If you put it on a social channel, you shorten the feedback loop because you put it in the world. People will see it immediately. If you don't like it, it won't perform. If you do like it, it will perform. So it's a direct feedback mechanism. And the other ways, people can comment on it, people can message you about it. Just you put your ideas into the world and you will get feedback from others so you can improve on your ideas. And you can maybe upgrade them. And then you post them again with your new take or added additions or extra examples. And that's how you can also use it as a self-development mechanism to improve your own ideas by getting feedback from other people and markets.
I love that, man. Yeah. And so you mentioned something too, like incorporating this into your daily routine, something you already do. If you have kids, like maybe you could write a little note to them or something in the beginning of the day, or writing lists or to-do lists. I think even like the act of sitting down and writing a to-do list every morning It's not necessarily influence. It might influence you to do your work or something. But I think there's just sitting down and just starting to write. I love that idea. And the thing that I think about is, we mentioned this when we had our prep call a couple weeks back, there's writing not one thing. There's 1,000 different ways to write things. And you broke them up into 3 different categories: business writing, journaling, things like that. Could you maybe talk through those 3 different types if people are just overwhelmed by the idea? Just write something. Break those up for us into those 3 different groups and talk about those if you could. And maybe that'll help people spark an idea, how they can incorporate those things into their daily routine.
Yeah, I like to think there are, of course, a lot of ways to write. But when you're thinking about it in business terms or career terms, I like to split them in 3 buckets, basically. It's the first is business writing. You're writing to people in your business. It's Slack communication. It's emails. It's maybe internal memos, like you just mentioned. It's just ways of communicating to people in your business or to your clients or to stakeholders, just keeping people up track and sharing ideas with them, giving them insights into how things are going, being more clear in how you communicate with people you're working with. And then expert writing, I like to see expert writing is the second bucket, which really is about writing about your expertise. So when you think about scientists, they write papers, they write research, they write documents, just synthesize of whatever they're learning or the problems they're solving. And they're writing about those things of how they're solving it and how they went about approaching it and the outcomes of that thing, maybe the experiments they've had, the hypothesis they've set for themselves. So really, you're the expert. You're trying to deepen your expertise and communicate your expertise with the world. And then the other part is copywriting. It's really focused on getting people to buy something. Maybe it's buying your design, maybe it's buying your project to start working with you, maybe it's even getting that job by writing concisely and trying to persuade or convince someone of your value or whatever you have to sell. That is a very powerful way to write either to many people or to one person specifically.
Yeah, I love that. The thing I was thinking about copywriting too, it's one of those things where as designers, we're often asked to think about conversion and all these metrics and stuff, drive this, drive that. And copywriting is a really great way to figure out how do I label this button and this headline to increase the conversion on this page or get people to sign up for a thing or take an action on a thing. That's something that I think a lot of us as designers, we expect other people to just hand us the thing and say, what does the copy say for this? But having a point of view there, practicing that's a really great thing. Your stuff might be terrible at first, but I think that's something that, especially copywriting for me, is something it's a huge, valuable skill to have for sure. Not everybody has the luxury of having a content designer or copywriter on the team. And so if you don't have access to those people, learning that skill is huge. And I would advise everybody to start practicing copywriting. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that one, but that's huge for me.
Yeah, I think if you run a business, copywriting is one of the most valuable things you can learn, because if you can write good copy, you can sell anything, basically. At least that's, I think, one of the highest earning marketers, for example. Those are usually copywriters. If they're very good at what they do and they can write a campaign like the Apple Think Different campaign, that's all about how do you sell the idea of your business or the brand into the minds of all the consumers are trying to attract. But it's really very sales oriented.
I love that. And especially for people who, like you said, business owners, if you're a freelancer, if you are trying to get more consulting clients or whatever it is, even for your portfolio, for your case studies, for your resume, this kind of stuff is just so important for you to maybe not master. I don't think your point here is to master it. I think you would probably say you're not a master yet. Nobody's master. It's to practice. It's to get in the habit of doing it so that you're always better than you were the day before. I love that. Which leads me to the next thing I want to talk about, as writing as a career multiplier, right? It's our careers are never over until we finally retire, but we're always trying to get better than we were before. And so I love this idea of a multiplier effect. Writing as a career multiplier. When I think about this is something that increase your influence, getting raises, promotions, convincing your boss that you deserve a raise or a promotion or a seat at the table or whatever it is. I'm curious from your perspective, how do you see writing impact your career as it relates to more broad things that we might never really think of tying back to writing?
Yeah, I think in general, by just writing, it's the best way to improve your thinking, because you're really trying to sharpen your thinking. It's like the idea of clear thinking is clear writing. If your writing isn't clear, your thinking isn't clear. Because if you think very clearly on an idea, you can very clearly articulate it, but also write it down. And if you can do that, to me, is feedback that the idea isn't that clear yet or it needs improvement. So by writing it down, you first off get better ideas, you become a better thinker. And by becoming a better thinker, you will make better decisions. And because you will make better decisions, you get better outcomes. And I think that's the core idea of writing. By writing things down, it doesn't have to be like, it shouldn't become a chore. It's just like you're curious about this thing. You're trying to deepen the knowledge about that thing and really get clear on whatever you're doing. Maybe it's a problem, maybe it's a business decision that's being made. If you just write it down, the decision that is being made and how it's being made and the things you're using to make that decision is generally, I think, a very powerful way to improve the value in your business. And when you've written it down, you also can document it, because when you have written it down, I made this decision because of X, Y, and Z reason, you just get that decision through. And then it shows that you made all the rationale behind that decision, and it's documented as well. So you can get back to that when that decision has made a lot of impact is, oh, that came because of a decision I've made. And here is proof of that.
Yeah, I love that, dude. That's something I think a lot of people overlook is the documentation and having that decision documented somewhere. After a meeting, such and such happened. Here's a decision we made and why. And then 6 months later, when someone's like, why did you guys do that thing? It was the stupidest idea I've ever heard. There's no way anybody in their right mind made that decision. You go back and you're like, these were the constraints. This was the context. This was the information we knew at the time. This is why we made that decision, you know? And like, even just the fact that you write that as it relates to career trajectory, like when it comes time, mid-year review or something, and your boss is like, that was the dumbest thing you guys have ever done. You can go back and be like, it wasn't that dumb. Look at why we made that decision. Otherwise, it's just like he said, she said, pointing fingers, and then you end up looking like a dummy. When I think about career trajectory, like that's one very specific example. But I think that documentation benefit is something so many people overlook, and just people taking notes in general in meetings is something that very rarely happens. But I don't know. That's something I just love, that idea of just having that documentation from your writing, just being there and accessible for later generations of you, your future Thijs looking back. Why did I make that dumb decision? Oh, here's why. I wrote it down. I love that.
Yeah. And I think it's very important to realize there that you shouldn't be writing about everything. You shouldn't write down everything. It's just when there is something important and you need to think through a decision, you just try to write down, okay, this is the decision we're making. This is why we're making it right now. And just as a document's sake, but only if it's like a very important decision. It's like maybe a new feature that will stay forever, or at least the idea is to add it forever. Then I think it's good to write down why you're making that decision. So maybe you back out and, okay, maybe this is not the right decision because we don't see why we should be doing this. That might save a lot of money in the long term and choose a better path instead.
All right. So I want to shift here to the 1,000-pound elephant in the room, which is AI and ChatGPT, or whatever flavor of AI you like to use for writing stuff. The first thing I think people do nowadays when it comes to writing something is they will go straight to ChatGPT, give it a prompt, copy and paste. And doing that defeats the purpose of everything that we've talked about so far, which is it helps you to think more about the thing. When you haven't actually thought about it, all you're doing is outputting a bunch of words with absolutely no thought put into it. And I don't know if you saw this, but there was an MIT study recently called Your Brain on ChatGPT, Accumulation of Cognitive Debt When Using an AI Assistant for Essay Writing Tasks. And essentially what they did, T-scans. Have you seen this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so for anybody who's not familiar, essentially you got dumb. You got real dumb. You got super dumb using AI to write everything for you instead of just thinking about it, writing it for yourself. Now, I don't know exactly if they were talking about helping you refine thoughts and things like that, which I think is a little bit different from like just giving it a prompt, copying and pasting. But people are doing this, no doubt. Everything we talked about, copywriting, notes, emails, messages, all that stuff. What do you say to people who are just defaulting to AI tools to write things when it comes to thinking about the benefits of writing? What do you say to people who just do that by default?
I think it's a slippery slope. It tends to be like the status quo path. It's like the easiest path forward is just put it into ChatGPT, get an output, and then you're iterating on that output. But because you started on the wrong foot, So what I usually recommend is to start by doing the thinking yourself, trying to put something out there. Maybe it's a list of bullet points, trying to do the thinking, walk through it so you still train your thinking muscle, whether relying on ChatGPT to give you the answer, because then you delegate your thinking to AI, and that's just basically delegated to the average, because AI is trained on all the models or all the information in the world, and it will just likely end up in the middle. So it will always be average. So when you don't give it the direction, you never give yourself the opportunity to improve, to do the thinking, and eventually also curate the output, of course. But it's maybe not the clearest answer, but it's like finding the right balance. I'm struggling to find the balance because it's hard. It's like easy to let ChatGPT do everything, but usually the outputs aren't. It's just, you really have to do the thinking. You really have to dig in. You really have to figure things out, and ideally even read everything if necessary, because then you will notice things that ChatGPT wouldn't filter. Just give you like the average thing, and it might also be wrong, and you would just not realize that and just assume the output is right. So my recommendation with AI is usually don't rely on it. Try to do the thinking yourself when you're writing something, and don't only use it to optimize your process and not change or replace your entire process.
I love that. So I wrote a book a year or two. Oh God, it's been a year or two already. And I have to be honest, dude, when I wrote my first draft of that, I was in a crunch, and I did a very stupid thing, and I got laid off, and I announced when I got laid off, instead of announcing the layoff, I announced like, I got laid off. I was like, hey, I'm writing a book. You can get a pre-order. So I was like under the gun, and I wrote a very shitty book. Like the first version of that thing was so bad. I'm not going to lie, dude. I actually used like an old version of ChatGPT too, and it was the free version because I didn't want to pay for it, to write a bunch of content for the book. And I went back and read it, and it was so bad. I deleted it all. I deleted every single word of it and just started over. I challenged myself to not write anything with AI. I only went back and revised sentences that I thought didn't really make sense or changed the wording of a paragraph here or there. But going back, it was like I felt myself getting dumber. I'm just like, what am I doing? What is the point of writing this book if I'm not even writing the book? And so it was interesting, like you said, like the average piece, like that I felt, I would never buy this book. This book is so stupid. And so I scrapped the whole thing. And one of the things that I've started to do now, I don't really write as much anymore, but what I do now for the way that I use AI is I use it for prompts. Just writers will get a prompt. Give me an idea. Give me 5 ideas for this thing. I don't like that idea. And then I'll build on that. And then from there, that becomes the thing. And so I don't know, that's one thing I really like, is like where I don't let it write for me. I might let it like summarize things that I've written or reword things that I've written in a way, but I'm writing it first. That's something I feel like so many people will just copy and paste directly from AI. And that is just like you said, dude, it's like the super highway to average. It might not be bad, but it's never going to be good. So I don't know, that's one thing I like, is just the prompt piece.
Yeah, that's also how I use it mainly, is to get more ideas, to get better examples of things that might not cross my mind, or I'm writing something and I can't find a word, I just type up and then I continue. And then later it's like, give me 20 words or 20 things that I can put in this ... within the entire story, because I just couldn't find the right words for it. Then I get 20 examples and I pick one example out of there and I put it in. And it's like an easy technical use case that improves the writing process instead of replacing your initial thinking, because I think you have to train your muscle to pick the right words for things to communicate the idea you're trying to communicate. And the better you get at that, the better you'll be at spotting that as well.
I love that. Well, let me ask you this. Where do you draw the line between letting AI help you and making sure that your own voice comes through? Is it what you just said, just not letting it for you, but just saying, I'll let it come up with a word or two? Or do you have a red line? What's that red line that you will never cross?
I think most of it is me just trying to iterate on what I already have. So that's where I use ChatGPT or things like Claude for. It's mostly like I write something down, and when I get stuck, I use it to ideate with me and find things. And then I still choose what is the best option of what ChatGPT is giving me. But I try to do most of the writing myself, or at least the thinking, to really get it the way I want it to. And I also force myself to think about this thing and deepen it out and iterate using ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just thinking back to that study, the way that I personally, because I'll say this, it's so easy to fall back on ChatGPT, just like, I'm busy, I have 1,000 things I have to do, write this thing for me right now. It's so easy to do that. But then when I think back, the way that I push myself to not is, what happens when this goes away? What do I do? How do I do my work? If ChatGPT went down tomorrow, or the service was down. I had a deadline and I couldn't open ChatGPT. What happens when I am so reliant on it that I can't do my work anymore? That scares the crap out of me personally. Like, I am addicted to it. I'm reliant on it. It's crack to get my work done. That should scare you, I think. Like, it's a great tool and it's a really awesome way to get those things done. But if you are relying on it so much that you can't get your work done without it, that should scare you. That should really scare you. It scares me because I found myself doing that like a little while ago, and I'm like, damn, if this service goes down, because there was one day when there was an outage on ChatGPT or something like that. And I had something, I'm like, I feel so stupid right now. I'm just like, I can't think of anything. And so anyway, that should scare you. If you're doing that, that'd be a wake-up call. I don't know. Maybe all it takes is like just one like bad outage for somebody to whip them into shape. I don't know if you have any experience there, but that happened to me. It scared the crap out of me.
So what do you use ChatGPT for, or like other tools?
So what I use ChatGPT a lot for the podcast. So for instance, a conversation guide for our shows, for episodes. So we'll have a conversation, we record it with the Otter. I copy and paste the transcript. I also take notes. So there's a lot of things that will jump out at me as something I want to talk about. So I also have notes. And then what I generally do is like, I'll say, take this transcript and take my notes, prioritize the notes, and help me craft a logical flow for a conversation. And that's something like I feel is fine to let AI do that. I always go through and I'm like, that does not work at all. This feels terrible. And I'll move things around and I'll shift this and things like that. But that's something that I found to be very useful. The other thing, here's something I did recently. I am moderating a panel at a conference coming up in a month. And I've got 4 different people that are going to be on this panel from different areas. They each had different insights, things that they want to talk about specifically. So we did a 30-minute interview prep, wrote down a bunch of notes, things they want to talk about, things they don't want to talk about, because some people want to talk about other things. Then I took all 4 of the transcripts, put that in ChatGPT with my notes, and said, using the notes, help me think of a logical flow from question to question and make sure that everybody gets an equal amount of questions. And so it did that for me. And it was terrible. But it was a really great starting point. And then I was like, no, that doesn't work. I want to have this guy here. I want to ask this question here. This woman, I want to put it first, whatever. And so it was just a starting point, but it wasn't copy and paste job. So anyway, that's like a way that I use it. Also, email subject lines. I hate email subject lines. Like I copy and paste the email for when I would do an episode release. And I'm like, write 10 options for email headline and give me an emoji to stick in the front of it or whatever. And it'll come up with 10 options. So like email subject, email preview text. Because stuff like that is inconsequential, like email preview text. I don't know. Maybe a marketer would want to strangle me for saying that, but I don't know. Perhaps that's a terrible thing to let ChatGPT do as far as like conversions and clicks and things like that. Somebody would probably disagree with me very much, but I'm not a copywriter, so that's something that's a couple ways I like to use it. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. I think it's also useful too when you read a book, for example, and there's like a framework inside. It's helped me put this in this framework. Or walk through these steps specifically, or how would it look like to do that? In general, I like to keep like the main arc and like the headline. I think I spend most time there, and I try not to delegate it to ChatGPT because I think that is like the highest leverage thing. So when you have the right headline, otherwise people don't read the rest and like the thinking. But yeah, it's definitely interesting technology. And on your, by the way, on your previous point in terms of that it makes you lazy, I think Paul Graham also wrote this article on write nots or writes and write nots. So because people will start relying on things like ChatGPT, they will delegate their thinking. So they're not thinking anymore, they're not writing anymore. And that will create more think nots, and that will make like a separate bucket. So the middle ground disappears and it all goes to the upper ends. It's like the writes and the write nots, people who do write and who don't write, and the people who think and the people who don't think. And it will remove the need.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and the other thing I was just thinking about as it relates to AI and letting AI do the thinking for you is there's been a lot of studies, like longevity studies. People who live longer tend to be people who engage in things and think, and they interact with people. They play board games, or they read, or they do things, as opposed to like when you retire and you just sit on the couch and watch TV all day and you do nothing. Those people end up not living as long as the people who go out and travel and do all those other things. And when a CT scan scans your brain and your brain is not being used, that should scare you as far as like how long you have to on this earth, because good God, if you start that now when you're in your 30s or 40s, or some people in their 20s, where are you going to be 20, 30 years from now if you have shifted your thinking all the way to just AI, letting AI do everything for you. I don't know. What's the point? I don't know. I don't know. I feel like an old man saying that, catch today and their AI. But
No,
like, I don't know,
I
man.
think you're right.
It scares me, dude. Honestly, I don't know. Like, it just terrifies me.
Yeah, I think when you're, I don't know how to say it, but I think there was this research about people who are doing like crossword puzzles and like maybe Rubik's Cubes and puzzles and things like that, that they tend to retain their thinking or mental state for longer. There's a study around that, which I find interesting.
That's a good use case for AI. Help me articulate this thing and explain this thing. Yeah, no, I love that, man. All right, so let me ask you this. So if everybody's like listening, they're like, oh, you convinced me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to start writing more. What are some things that people can start doing today? Somebody's listening. What do you want them to know? What do you want them to take away? Where do you want them to start?
It really depends on your goals. So if you're trying to build an audience or put your thinking inside of the world, I would recommend starting to write and publish maybe a few posts per week or one post a day like I did, whatever works best for you. Or if that feels too much of a bridge, start commenting, put your ideas under other people's posts so it's more reactive. So you actually can become more proactive. Or when you're really trying to synthesize things and think about ideas or problems and write essays like we are delegating to ChatGPT now, or at least students are. I think writing essays on problems or topics is a very good way to deepen your expertise and get your thinking on paper and iterate on it. Or even as simple as when you're reading something, you just take notes of stuff. You just hold your notepad or your Apple Notes and you just take notes of everything and try to get things as clear as possible to communicate it to yourself, and then maybe try to share that idea with friends, maybe through Slack or WhatsApp or whatever. Just try to share ideas with your friends and try to communicate very clearly what you're learning. Or maybe it's like a newsletter you make for a few friends that you just keep updated. Here's what I'm learning, or here's what I'm reading, or here's what I'm doing. Just trying to find a way that works for you. So in general, it really depends on your goal. When it's like external, publish something every day or every week. Maybe it's a newsletter, maybe it's a post. And when you're trying to do it for your own benefit and trying to do it privately, maybe it could also be journaling. A lot of people enjoy or get value from putting their ideas inside of a world or on paper to get it out of their head so they can move on with whatever they are doing.
Yeah. I don't know if this falls under one of those things you were talking about, but I love lists. I love writing lists. I always carry a pen and a notebook, and I just love the idea of writing things down and thinking through things. It helps me remember things when I write down too, which is also helpful because I have ADHD and it's very easy for me to forget. But when I'm in meetings, I like to write notes in a notebook. It helps me to go back, and it sucks sometimes because you can't copy and paste, but I don't know if this is exactly the same, but the act of writing to me helps me remember things more as well. So
Yes.
It's like, it's the idea of thinking, but it's also the idea of remembering. When I write things down, I tend to remember them. I think there's been some studies around that as well, but that kind of thing, it just helps me to think about the outlines for stuff. Or like I said, we do like design briefs and PRDs and stuff at work. So I have a notebook, and like I write that stuff down in a notebook when I'm thinking about it, or a list of features or something, before I go and type it out. I don't know. For me, like the act of writing, it's just like that added benefit of remembering as well as thinking. But anyway, it's good advice, dude.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the 30-day challenge. It's funny. I see people sometimes start the 30-day LinkedIn post challenge, and it's day 1. I'm starting a challenge. I don't know what to write about. So we'll like that. I don't know if that like really helpful, but I love the idea though of like the notes, and like you mentioned this before, you post every day, but that doesn't mean you write every day. So you go and you think about the things you're going to write, and you write it ahead of time. And so you have time to sit and let it stew. And you're not waiting 5 minutes before your deadline or whatever deadline you gave, 10:30 Eastern, whatever it is, to start sitting down and write. So I love that. And that's, I don't know, it's just good advice. It's just start. I think that's the best thing. Just start and try. So that like your first iteration is going to be terrible. I think that's something.
Yeah, and try to keep it very simple or short for yourself so you actually do it. So if you stick to 30 minutes a day and you don't make it 5 minutes, just make something you can stick with and feel like you're checking off the box so you complete it. And so you reinforce the habit and maybe look at what it's getting you. But my biggest recommendation is just to try to become a better writer. I think that's always the best way to build the habit, to get better at writing, to also get the best outcomes out of writing. When it's like a very creative act, you also tend to get the best outputs. When you're trying to get clients, you need clients, I noticed that the writing quality suffers because it's driven by another outcome than really trying to put your best ideas into the world.
I love it. All right, Thijs, this has been an awesome conversation. I think it's so important. People out there, just start somewhere. It doesn't matter if it's good. It doesn't matter if it's bad. Just start and then see where it goes. I love that. Thijs, before we get out of here, I've got some questions I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. Do you have some time to stick around and answer some silly questions?
Of course I do.
All right. Awesome, dude. first up, first thing that comes to your mind, you don't have to think too hard about it. What is your favorite non-design book?
Can I say 3?
Sure.
I think I have 3 or 4 books that really changed the way I approach things. So if we're talking about building a writing habit, I think Atomic Habits is still one of the best books on building habits. So if you're trying to build a habit, it's a very easy read. It's easy to get into. Then the second, I like the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I think that has also very much influenced my life in terms of productizing myself. I think that's the core of the book. Like, how do you get the most of out of what you're doing? And then 2 other books that really changed my thinking is first The Black Swan. It's from Nassim Taleb. It's about how randomness and luck influence a lot of what we're doing. And then the other book is The Beginning of Infinity. It talks about how knowledge is infinite and knowledge will always keep on improving, and knowledge gets created by solving problems. And all problems are solvable, but every problem that's solved creates a new problem. So it will always be a wheel of problems that we're solving. So I think those are my favorite books right now. I'm now reading The Beginning of Infinity. It's a tough read, but it's very interesting. It's a physicist, so.
Oh, God. I don't think I know that, but what is it about?
It's about knowledge and how knowledge is created, and he explains how explanatory knowledge works.
Okay.
It talks about explaining things and reasoning, and I think he's a very smart guy. It's very useful, actually, of how you look at the world and try to make everything relative.
I love that, dude. That sounds very heavy. Good luck.
It is.
That one. It sounds interesting, though. I'm sure you'll be better off after you finish it, I'm sure. All right, next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
I listen to so many episodes of Tim Ferriss, but I haven't listened him to for a while. And I really like My First Million. I think they are really good at telling stories and making you laugh. So I really like that podcast. Sometimes I just listen to podcasts to wind down. So
yeah, I love that.
Really
that's a good show. I love that. I want to be on that show one day. I need to make $1 million first. All right, next up, what is your favorite meal? And this could be something that you've eaten at a restaurant, your grandma used to cook. Favorite?
Pad Thai.
Pad Thai. Anywhere in particular that you like?
I had this one place in Thailand that was like in Copenhagen on the beach. That was definitely the best one. But I also liked my own one.
Yeah, okay. All right. You picked up a few things in Thailand, so at least it's authentic. I would imagine the Thai food in Thailand is pretty authentic. So
it is.
I hope it'd be good. If you're like, this Pad Thai in Germany was better than the Thai version.
It rarely happens.
Never. All right, next up, this might tie into the favorite meal, favorite vacation spot or Pad Thai.
Well, it's either Thailand for me, but I haven't traveled to that many countries, or Italy. I think those are my favorites so far.
You've been more countries than me, dude. So you're good. I'm always jealous. All you Europeans out there, you get to go all these beautiful places in like a quick hour-long train ride. We got to wait 12-hour flight.
Yeah.
You guys are lucky. You guys are lucky. I hope you realize that. All right. Next up, last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Design tool. That's funny because I only like design tool Figma. It would be either Framer or Jitter. I like Jitter, how simple it is and how quickly I can animate visuals, basically, or as motion design. And Framer just for building websites.
Yeah, Framer's a nice one. I have never used Jitter. I have to try that one out. I always love hearing what people have to say, all the different tools they use. I had somebody the other day that said conversations. I was like, oh, that's so smart. I never thought of that. Conversations, that's a good answer. Awesome. All right, Thijs, so this has been an amazing conversation, man. I learned a lot. I hope out there that we have convinced you, 1, to start writing, and 2, not to rely on AI. You're going to be dumber in a little while for it. Please don't do that. Before we get out of here, Thijs, give yourself a plug. Let everybody know where they can find you. Links to all your stuff, your consulting, LinkedIn, all that stuff. Tell us where they can find you.
I think the best way to find me is just LinkedIn. You just search my name and there's content over there, and also read free resources that you could get. And my business is Value Positioner. So if you are a designer who has turned into a founder and need helps with growth and you want a partner who helps you think through that and scale your business, you can reach out to me via LinkedIn.
Right on. I love it. And for all you Americans out there, Thijs, Thijs, we will include all the links in the show notes. If you don't know how to spell Thijs' name, you'll probably have a hard time finding that one. We'll link to it in the show notes. Once again, dude, thanks for coming on, man. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.